blessings you've given us, and just thank you for the peace and heart you've given those that accept it, Lord. We just pray that you be with our people, be with our children, Lord, as they go back to school. Just prepare their hearts and their minds for the journey ahead. And I just thank you for all the many blessings you've given each and every one of our citizens. Be with those that need you in a healing way, Lord. Just put your hand on them. Just allow their families to love them, give them peace, Lord. I just thank you for your soldiers that are serving overseas, Lord. Just thank you for the ones that are back here at home. Just be with all of us and guide us and direct us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Next we have roll call.
Julia Coates. Here. John Garvin.
Here.
Jewel England.
Here.
Bill John Baker. Jack Baker. Harley Buzzard.
Here.
Bradley Cobb. Joe Crittenden.
Here.
Jody Fishinghawk. Meredith Fraley. Janelle Fulbright. Here. Chuck Hoskin Jr.
Here.
Tanya Glory Jordan.
Present.
Curtis Snell. Chris Stubb.
Yes.
David Thornton. Kara Cowan Watts. We do have a quorum.
Okay. Next, I would entertain a motion to approve the July 12th minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We will move on to reports, and first we have Career Services. Ms. Kelly is in a meeting in Pryor, I'm told, and so Mr. Legg is reporting in her absence.
Good afternoon. I'm Darrell Legg. I'm the Vocational Program Manager for Career Services, and Diane Kelly is in Pryor meeting with Pepsi for their Green Initiative. I know that everyone has received their reports for July. Is there any questions at this time?
Any questions?
I got one.
Councilor Bowman.
Where are we on that training grant, that OJT? There's $850,000 that's going to be granted. Have we started the processes of selecting people for that grant yet?
Yes, sir. And also Kim Carroll and Brenda Fitzgerald has been in Washington, D.C. for the last 2 weeks. So that the ball's rolling on that.
And just a follow-up question,
Yes.
Madam Chair, is on the OJT training, are those going to be done at OTEX, or are we going to do them here at the Cherokee Nation? Or?
No, OJT would be like could be like a company that's set up when we do a contract with them where we'll pay half the wages and the company will pay half the wages. And at the end of the 6 weeks or 12 weeks training, the company picks them up full time and that ends the contract.
Okay, and the other follow-up question I had was, this answers, I guess, because a lot of these are not going to be payroll certified companies that you're going to place them with.
No, it could be any
Yeah, I
company.
understand.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Fulbright.
I have a comment. I'm very proud of Darrell. He's one of our former Central graduates and one of my former pupils, and I'm really proud of him. That's all I have to say.
Very good.
Thank you.
That left you speechless, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Y'all took it easy over today.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Next we have the Executive Director, Group Leaders Report. Ms. Nye.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've submitted our reports for this month, so I'll be happy to answer any questions about those. Also, I have here with me today Corey Bunch, and I'd like him to stand. Since, when was it, Corey? About May? A couple of months ago, he's been serving as Deputy Group Leader for Education. So I just wanted you to meet him, and anytime in my absence that Corey can help you with something, he's perfectly willing and happy to do so and capable of doing so. He served as principal at Sequoia. He has served as a contract manager for the Heritage Center for us. And we brought him back out of the woods, so to speak, and now he's going to serve as Deputy Group Leader, and he's a very sharp and capable person, so very organized, which offsets me in a very positive way. So I'm happy to have Corey to help us out in education. I did have a couple of things in addition to your report. In last month's meeting, there was a request that we send special communication to scholarship recipients about the amount that we're going to receive and why. What we did was to amend our award letter to specifically spell that out, that if you're getting a lesser amount than $2,000, here's why. If you're taking so many hours, this is the amount you can expect to receive last semester. If you took so many hours last semester, this is the amount you can expect to receive. So hopefully it will clarify the amount that is on their award letter for them. So I just wanted to follow up with that update. School, of course, started last Wednesday. We have approximately 396 to be exact, at Sequoia from grades 7 through 12, and started with some special activities there. We've also started school at elementary and at Head Start on the same day. Head Start started with a full contingent with a new classroom in Tahlequah in a partnership with Tahlequah Public Schools, to assist teen mothers and their young children. So it's a brand new pilot program there at Tahlequah we're really excited about, because we've not been cited in a school for that purpose in the past before. So it's a real good opportunity to see about impact we can have on young teen mothers and those children, and allow them to continue in the school system. We also had last week a special event in Siloam. 110 people attended that event, a lot of them speakers. In fact, an overwhelming majority of them were speakers, to convene about what's important to include in a cultural curriculum for the Cherokee Nation. And that's been something we've discussed here and there all over the nation over a period of years. In fact, all the years I've been here. And so it was very good to bring all of those thoughts together, so that we can build one core curriculum that everyone will talk about in a consistent way when we do programming in schools, when we do publications, when we do training for our own staff and so forth. So it's a very important start to get on the right track and listen to people with that knowledge, so that we can capture that and build our curriculum from it. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have of me.
Councillor Soap.
Yeah, sometime ago, Melanie, we talked to Dr. Morton, and he was saying that they were running some kind of pilot program for concurrent students. I believe it was over at Oaks or somewhere. And do we have any results back from that yet, or did you start?
Yeah, I only recently learned of that, the concurrent enrollment with TCC, I believe.
Right. That's something I think that we should really look at, because at this time I've received several requests, and I'm not aware of any funding opportunities for those students. And I mean, they're really out there taking advantage of some of those, classes in college and stuff. And I think it might be advantageous for us to get some feedback from that. I was just curious if there was any of that feedback yet.
We'll take a look and get a report for you.
Yeah.
I would be interested in that. There's not any special funding streams that we have for that. At Sequoia, we promote it and fund it from the school. So, but we'd like to promote it in the public schools too, because of course those are our students as well. So it's a very good initiative. Thank you.
Councillor Fulbright.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Thornton and I submitted several students for consideration that had extenuating circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And we inquired so many times about it. We got an email back that said, do not inquire anymore, more or less is the way it was stated. We'll notify you when a decision is made. We still haven't heard anything. And there's all kinds of unfortunate situations that can happen out there. And so I'd still like to hear an answer on each one of those that we submitted.
Madam Chair, we are at this point trying to move forward with as many of the 2,762 students that were timely, complete, and that we need to move forward and get checks out as quickly as possible. We've processed about 1,400 award letters to date to get checks begin to be mailed on those. We want to avoid late charges as much as possible, and so that's really the thrust right now. We do have those cases that we have set aside, and we have an internal committee who's pouring through them, doing some fact finding, and we'll be making decisions on them. It is a small amount of students. There's probably about, I think, 10 to 15 left in that queue to decide. And so, of course, our priority is to get the many others done, but we are still working on the others, and we will be rendering a decision quite soon. I think I was the one that sent the last communication, and I just wanted you to know that I will be responding to you back on those cases as to what the outcome is. So I will do that as soon as we make a decision, and we'll make it with all due haste. I think we have a meeting in the next coming week. So.
Got it? Councillor Jordan.
Melanie, were the award letters due on August 6th?
They were.
If they were not turned back in, are you considering that not timely? If they were turned in a couple days late? I had one that it went to the parents' home and he was off working. And then when he got home, they took it that same day to your department, and they were afraid that that was going to be a problem.
Well, we are considering them late. However, I've asked our staff to accept all of them that are being submitted, even if they're late, because of course we know that we can fund all of the applications that were timely applied for. So I do want to utilize every dollar that we have for each applicant that turned in a timely application. So I would encourage them to go ahead and submit it. We will be processing the timely ones first, and from that point forward it will be, as long as the money is available, we'll continue to process those.
As I understand it, the application and everything was timely, or you would
Right,
have
or
sent
we
the
wouldn't have gotten an award letter.
But he was simply out of town on a short-term job, and when he got back, well, his mail was there and that letter was there, and they took it that same day, but I think it was due on Friday and they didn't get it in till Monday or something like that.
I don't anticipate that being a problem because, certainly that's soon after the deadline. And if you all know of any other cases like that, please encourage them to go ahead and get that in as soon as possible.
Now, and if I understood you right, if they received less than the $2,000, it would have been because they didn't finish with a full-time load the semester before.
That's right.
So that's basically the only reason that they don't get the full amount?
That's right.
Okay. And then I noticed here, or I believe you said that Head Start has started.
Yes.
And I just wondered, are they going to be able to implement their after-school program with the funds that we provided for them this fiscal year?
I met with Verna and her staff, was it about approximately a week ago, to get a report on that and to have some discussion around it. They gave me a report, and it appears that they had already implemented it at the beginning of the school year and have been funding that program, that after-school program, with the federal funds. And so I asked her if we were to utilize tribal funds, then how would we utilize them, what federal funds would it free up, and for what purpose would we need to do that. And she's going to get back to me with that information.
Because I think on the last report that I saw, their match, they have to do that 20% match. We only fund them to 80, or they're federally funded only for 80% of their program. Then they have to find 20% in donations. And I think the last report I saw, they were only 35% or so in their donation status. And of course, our money counts towards the donation portion. And I just want to be sure that they're able to use it, or if we need to provide some carryover or something, we'll need to know that by budget time. If they're working on their program and they need that money to carry over, well, we'd need to know that.
I'll ask her specifically about the match. Of course, she prepared her original 2010 budget without the additional council funds that the council later appropriated. So I'll have to take a look at that and see what matches she doesn't think might come through.
It's just basically the economy, I think. They just can't get the money that they used to be able to get donated. A lot of it is your time.
Right, it's parent time.
But a lot of it's not, too.
Okay. I will definitely check with her on that.
Councillor Hoskin?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On those students who were untimely and there might be extenuating circumstances, have you identified what kind of factors you're looking at, or is it you just really have to wait till you get in there and see the applicants yet?
Many times we just have to examine on a case-by-case basis. Just some examples, we had one student that was in the hospital at the time the application period came and went. And so those types of things that were out of the hands of the student that we should consider, we're trying to consider those.
And I wasn't here at the last committee meeting, it might have escaped my attention, but is directed studies somewhere else within the department now?
It has always been created. When it was first created, it was created as a sort of standalone program separate from higher ed, and it's been managed that way. So the Directed Studies program has its own deadline. Lisa Trice-Turtle manages that, and those awards are, go through a committee review process because they're highly competitive. And of course they have to sign an agreement and those sorts of things that are different from the higher ed program. So they are managed separately. We're talking about bringing them under one umbrella though in the future, probably next fiscal year, and trying to manage them more closely together.
Is it reported? Is it in the report? It's normally in the report, isn't it?
It's
I don't
usually
have any concerns.
it's typically a separate page in the report, and if it's omitted, if you all would please let me know, I'll take a look too.
I didn't see it, but if you take a look, give it to us if it wasn't there. That's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councilor Fishing-Hawk.
Well, I don't know if this falls under your lot, the Cherokee Speakers Program, where we have the speakers in these communities that go out and go to the different houses where our kids are being cared for.
Oh, I believe that's a program under Norma.
Is that okay? I did not know. The other thing was the scholarships. I've been hearing talk and gossip about maybe lowering the scholarship amount.
Well, as we get into the budget presentation that's on this agenda, I have prepared for you an overview of the budget for 2011 that we've submitted to you all. We would like to propose and have been working on what perhaps some policy changes that might need to occur for higher ed, and I'm ready to go through some of those ideas with you today.
Okay.
Councilor Buzzy.
Melanie, I have a couple of questions. And I know the special funding that we set aside on motor vehicle tags won't be available till January, February, March of 11. But have we got the policies and stuff drafted, rough drafted?
We are working on that. I've assigned that to Shelley Butler Allen
Okay.
and her group, and they've been working on an RFP that we hope to get out very soon so that by the time the money's available, we will have the awards identified so that they'll have at least 60 days to write those grant applications, and we'll be able to make selections before that time so they can hit the ground running.
Okay, good. The other thing is community-based JOM program.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I have some concerns about the program in J. Does the education department do audits on those particular programs, or I guess on all JOM programs?
We don't routinely audit all of them at the same time, but as they send in their invoices, of course, we're checking as to allowability of costs on each of those. If there are issues that we know of, like a school's running into difficulties, then we may do a special review of that particular school's program. But if you know of any concerns...
Well, the reason I say is I've heard parents have told me that the kids up there get really nothing out of the JOM program. Maybe $7 to $10 and stuff every year, and they've asked me to come to the meetings and see if I could do it. I said, well, I really don't have control over that because it's a community-based organization. But I just got a report that they're looking at to make some changes up there. But I was just wondering if someone actually took a look and see what the expenditures were versus what the JOM kids are actually receiving.
Okay.
And so, anyway, I just wanted to bring that to your attention and maybe do take a look at that.
Okay, I appreciate that. We will do that.
The other thing is a follow-up on Councillor Jordan's question on the after-school program. I guess I'm really not familiar with that because can you give us an overview of what an after-school program is?
Essentially, for Head Start, it just means that in selected sites, and Tahlequah is one of them, they would provide extended care. So they would continue to provide care beyond the school day, so that for parents that work, their kids would be kept longer during the school day.
And I don't know if you do that at J. Don't have anybody
I think
at Head Start,
Salina
so-
was one of the sites, but Jay was not. I believe there was only 3 sites that they piloted with.
Okay, well, I may want to go back and revisit that if I have any constituents that's interested in something like that
Okay.
right now. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Jordan.
Just maybe as a comment to Harley's follow-up. Now, the money that we give the Boys and Girls Club provides for after-school at all of the sites that
That's a good point.
Boys and Girls is located at.
Yeah, I was aware of that one.
And it's a good number of them are Cherokee children. I had some additional questions. On that directed studies, Melanie, if we had someone that was accepted late to medical school, I think what happened is somebody dropped out and they were the next one to move up. Is it too late for them to apply for directed studies?
I believe it is. They have.
I mean, they did not know that they were going to be accepted. That's a pretty, and it's a full-blood young man. I'm wondering if, do we not have any flexibility in those deadlines?
Well, we had more applications for directed studies than we had slots, and so it was very highly competitive. So even the students that applied on time, of course, we weren't able to select all of them. We have a certain number of slots each year that we can provide with that program because, of course, it provides a full scholarship. So there's probably not opportunity at this time because there's probably already students that had applied and were eligible but just weren't selected because it was competitive and we had to select the top students for that.
Yeah. Okay. The other question that I had was on the Cherokee First. I think you got the email that I had sent an individual over to Cherokee First, and he was told that the adult assistance money is only for adults that are in an educational endeavor. Is that correct? Is that all we're using the adult assistance funds for?
That's a community services program. I can check with them and check it out. It would depend on how they wrote that policy when they put it into place. I know that they haven't expended all the funds, so I can check on that.
Can you also update us on what amount of funds have been expended from that at some point?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could email them and answer that for us today if you could.
I can follow up by email.
Okay. And I had one other question. I think they call it the Healthy Nations grant for the schools.
Yes.
Are we going to do that again this year?
I think it just was announced for healthy and wellness policies around food service and healthy lifestyles and activity. They're $10,000 awards, and I just saw a flyer on that, and I'd be happy to send that around by email as well.
Would you email that to us also, and along with the application? Now, are those applications, Melanie, to your knowledge, are they sent out to each school, or do we need to get them out to the schools in our area, or how does that work?
We were looking at communication to the superintendents on an entirely different matter, and I thought it would be a good idea if we included that in that communication, so we can look at doing that in that letter so that all the schools get notice of that. I was curious about that myself, so I think we'll take that on and do that in education.
And if you would go ahead and send it to me, I'll follow up with some of the folks that asked me about it last year.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Buzzy.
And Melanie, Councillor Jordan just brought up a thought. I would like to have the contact people that you contact within my district. I'm sure you guys are getting them out there, but I'd like to know who they are.
For public schools in general?
Sure.
Okay. Because there'll be one list for all the schools that all the, say, motor vehicle tax schools that we deal with there. There'll be a list for all the ones within our jurisdiction, and then there's a JOM schools list.
Well, I'd like to have the contact with schools in my district, and the reason I say that is sometimes I'll get something off of the internet or come from the nation, and I'll send it up there to school. I'm not sure I'm sending it to the right person. So if you just give me that name, I'll make sure that they may get double whammy on things like that.
And sometimes staff change, and
Yeah.
we don't always know it too, so.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam.
Councillor Jordan.
Just as a follow-up, could we all have that information for all, for our districts, if that would be possible? Because sometimes I wonder what's happening to those applications, because they'll ask me and say, well, we didn't know about it until too late. So this way I can say, well, you got it on a certain date, it came to your office. It would
And sometimes it doesn't filter down to the
it would
person.
certainly be helpful.
That happens with us as well, so I understand that.
Any other questions? Thank you. Ms. Thompson is not here, so we will move to old business. There is none pending, and we move to new business. And Ms. Knight, I think you're probably up again for this. This is a discussion of the proposed budget for the education group. This was something that Jack Baker, Councilman Baker, had suggested at the last ENF meeting, was during our committee meetings this time, that each committee might take up its particular portion of the proposed 2011 budget just for discussion. And I think this is the only committee in which we're actually going to be doing that. But Mr. Evans has prepared this, which I think comes out of our book. But anyway, it makes it a little easier for us to look at this without bringing the whole thing. And then Ms. Knight has also prepared a presentation, as I understand it, for this.
And it's going to go right
Oh,
to your
okay.
face.
So you too. Marianne?
Just for a point of clarification now, Julia, this doesn't take the place of our budget
No.
hearings, right?
No,
This
this
is
is-
just to become familiar and so that we can ask.
You can ask questions here, and I think that the hope was that maybe it would shorten the time period that we spend on budget hearings a little bit if we could get some of just the questions to try to understand better some of the programs and so forth, if we could go through those here. At least, yeah.
Refer to it on the Can I get one more? Okay, what I've prepared just are some talking points to talk through many of the changes that we went through this fiscal year in preparing the budget for 2011. Just overall, and I hope my numbers match up with those, because that would be a good thing. I have our total budget at over $51 million for 2011. And he has the 2010 budget.
Could we make that come to your front too, because
Might be a good idea. Can you make sure I know where I'm pulling my numbers so I can do that for purposes of comparison?
He's got $4 million more in 2010 and $4 million less in 2011.
I'm not sure. Jennifer, can you help me out with this $51 million number? Because he's got 47.
Who's got 47? Mine?
Yeah, I didn't think
I don't
the
include
total.
transfers.
Okay. I just included total budget. So that explains the difference in our numbers.
Can I ask what that means? You don't include what?
Okay, when we take money from our front pocket, put it in our back pocket, but it's not going outside of the nation. Those are called transfers, interfund transfers, intra-fund transfers. Either way, no check is cut. but historically, we've been forced to include transfers in the comprehensive budget authority number because it's an expense type of a transaction. And all expenditure of funds shall be provided for according to the Constitution. We've interpreted that to mean that we really need to provide authorization for the transfer. What can happen if you include the transfers, if you transfer the same dollar to two different places, all of a sudden you've got a $3 budget, you only have $1. Okay, so last year I started reflecting some reports as expense only. This year, all my reports are expenditure only, so that we don't get confused as to just how much dollars are we actually talking about here. That's what's going to be the difference between their total budget of 51 and my 47.
So that includes all the budget authority is $51,431,666. So that compares to 2010 of just over $50 million. That is the original 2010 budget. So when you run system reports that have an amended 2010 budget, it will be different than that. The staffing for 2011, 398 staff planned compared to 379 in 2010. To have a breakdown of new positions and vacancies, 27 new positions, 16 vacancies budgeted in that budget. Generally, in terms of the
Can you go back
overall-
to that first one?
Yes.
Okay, if your staffing plan is 398, and you had 379 last year, and you're going to budget 27 new positions, is the difference between maybe I'm just not looking right, but isn't that 19 positions?
What we do very often when we do a new budget proposal is to also eliminate positions. So I didn't go through if we eliminated any positions in this upcoming budget. When we shift and reorganize and re-identify titles, sometimes we'll eliminate a position, create two, and so forth, so the numbers may not match up from, if you were just to add the 27, for example, to the 379, it's not going to add up to the new budget because we may replace one management position with 3 other types of positions.
So we're creating 27 positions and carrying over 16 that were vacant last time.
They were vacant as of May this year.
And can we find out from you prior to budget hearings what the 27 new positions are and what the 16 are and how long they've been vacant, the 16?
I can tell you all of that except for how long they've been vacant.
And that's kind of critical to me. I see a theme occurring here where we have vacancies year after year after year of the same position, but we're funding them. And I'm just kind of wondering why that's happening.
Bring that spreadsheet, Jennifer. Vacancies are numerous.
I've been calling about it since 07.
Yeah, they're all in the payroll worksheets, but I made an attempt to add them up.
Melanie, could we pull them from the worksheets and identify those areas of the 27 full-times you want to budget and the 16 that are carrying over, what those are?
That's what I did
And
for my
then-
own benefit for today. So I can go through them with you verbally.
And then could you email those to us separately?
Certainly.
And if you could figure out how long those 16 have been vacant?
I'd like to tack something onto that before budget hearings. I'd like you to be able to mark them, that whether they're gen fund dollars or not.
Okay. And I can outline that for you today.
Yeah, okay.
So let me just run through that right quickly while we're on the slide. For new positions, early Head Start was almost 6 FTEs. It's 5.77 FTEs. Early Head Start expansion. When I say expansion, I mean that new pilot project with Calico. There's 9 new employees.
Those are all going to be federal dollars, aren't
Those
they?
are all federal. Immersion, which is the elementary school, 4.33 new employees. And that consisted of adding a grade, because we add a grade each year. We're adding 5th grade this fall. A new principal to oversee pre-K through 8th grade. So the entire elementary.
That's going to be gym fund dollars.
Those are gym fund dollars. And about, I believe, at least two of those positions have been filled since this budget was prepared. So that's probably something that we need to also report to you, is how many of these have been filled.
If you could add that to your list, that would be all right.
Higher ed / directed studies, I pooled these for the purposes of looking at it because I see them as similar functions. 4 new positions, and those are tribal funds. Sequoia High School, 2 new positions, and that is federal. Translation, which is a tribally funded endeavor, 2 new positions, and I believe at least one of those have been filled since this budget was prepared. Okay, then going to vacancies, so that represents the 27. And vacancies, 2.77 in early Head Start.
Federal?
Federal. 1 vacancy in the early Head Start expansion, the top of that project, so a total of 377 in early Head Start. Immersion has had 2 vacancies at the time this budget was prepared.
Tribal?
Tribal. Higher Ed Directed Studies had 1 vacancy. And Sequoia High School had 7.5 vacancies.
The last 2 are federal funds?
Yes. I'm sorry, Higher Ed Directed Studies is tribally funded. We get a small amount of federal funds, but that goes directly to scholarships. We supply the staff. And administrative services, there's 2 positions, and those are IDC funded, and 1 of them has been filled. So that represents the 16 or thereabouts. I think it comes out to 16.27, so I've rounded down to 16 on this report. Okay, so I'll answer how long they've been vacant and how many have been filled up to this point. Okay. Okay, just an overview of the federal sources. We believe and project that they'll be stable for 2011, but you'll see some changes in the budgets related to federal funds. The major changes I outline here. The first 2 things are related to stimulus funds. Both Head Start and Sequoia had a significant amount of stimulus funds in 2010 that have been spent down or being spent down, and so those are reductions in the 2011 budget. They're one-time funds. The Learn and Serve program, which you see is other federal in the budget, was not funded. It was a 3-year project. We had carried over funds. We've extended those funds down, and we're applying for a succeeding grant, but it will be a much smaller grant. So we've made a budget for 2011, but you'll see it as a much smaller budget for 2011. So those are the primary federal changes in the budget. The real news is the tribal funds and all of the changes that are going on in this budget for tribal funds. First of all, we were required to align our budget, as did all of the other groups of the nation that were spending tribal funds, for an adjustment for prior carryover. We've spent down carryover to a large extent, so we have to come in line with an annual budget. In regards to tribal funds, education is a service group that spends the most tribal funds, and so we were largely impacted as a result of that. Overall, we are budgeting about $3 million less from 2010 to 2011 in tribal funds, and we have been able to budget $3 million less with no layoffs in that budget. So we don't expect any reduction in force as a result of our budget changes.
Councilman Baker.
Yeah, and I might be skipping ahead. I'm looking at higher education.
Yes.
And in the higher ed Pell scholarships. Last year, we had budgeted almost $2 million and zero this time, correct?
Well, one thing that we did with regard to the scholarship funds is we combined the AUs. So we merged the account units for all the scholarships into one, because essentially we were managing them all the same, whether they were Pell, non-Pell. So we merged them into a single AU.
But I guess my question is, you've moved it down from tribal funds to motor fuel tax.
To some extent, yes, we're proposing and that some of the reserve, and when the treasurer sent the budget over, I believe that she included this in the budget act that she's proposing, but there is a reserve sitting out there that was intended to reserve, and I believe this is the way it's characterized, an amount of funds that would provide for scholarships for the students that are in the current program, so that if the program ever ended, we could continue their education through the end of their college career. That fund wouldn't be enough to make that, wouldn't be enough of a reserve to actually accomplish that. We're spending about $10 million a year, and the reserve is much, much less. What we would propose is, in order to fund the spring awards at the same level as we're funding them in the fall, is to utilize some of those reserve funds to do that, because gen funds were not available to do that.
Okay, but when you say a reserve fund, are you tapping in the restricted dollars that we put back years ago for education scholarships, and that comes out of motor fuels and is supposed to be earmarked and never used?
The 25% that's set aside, no.
You're not touching that?
No, the 25% stays the same.
And it's still going in there?
Yes.
Okay.
This was a separate reserve, and do you have anything to add about which fund that was funded from? Do you know when that was set aside? What year? It was set aside in the late 90s and just never utilized, just sat there as a separate reserve in addition to the 25%.
But you're going, but if you spend it, it's not going to be there in case there is a hiccup, right?
Well, no, but the $22 million that's setting aside in that other reserve is.
Unless if federal funds cut off completely. But,
Right, if federal funds cut off completely, then we're in a world of hurt all over.
Okay.
But I will go through higher ed in a whole lot more detail in a couple of moments here.
Councillor Jordan.
Well, when you do that, tell me where the scholarship money is. I mean, I just don't see it. Maybe
It is reduced significantly.
Well, that's what I want to know. How much are we talking it being reduced? Because I don't even see it. I see zero.
Okay. I haven't looked at Doug's reports and
Is it under,
O2.
MFT higher ed scholarships?
1024,001.
I think so.
and there's also a DOI budget that funds part of higher ed.
So
So the 768,513 under DOI subgovernment that funds.
so that's part of it right there?
Yes. In addition to the motor
That
fuel tax.
3222000?
Yes.
Okay. And then the 1024001, we should be able to add those up and see how that compares to what we gave last year?
Yes. And it was over 10 million last year, so it is a reduction.
Do we expect fewer people to apply?
We do not. We expect about 10% more to apply. And again, we have a strategy for that, so I'd like to go through that with you. If we'd like to skip to that, I can do that. It's the largest item to be discussed, so.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Before we go to that, I just have one
question. Melanie. And that involves the childhood development. You've got significant cuts there. I'm assuming it's come from a federal level, is it not?
Can you point me to which line?
The first one, childhood development, and it's just the DHHS general. And then the total with in childhood development, we've basically reduced our budget to $3.8 million.
Oh, overall.
Right, and so what impact is that, do we anticipate that having on our programs? We talked about that there's no reduction in force, so these people's got their jobs, but does that mean that what does that actually mean in your eyes?
Well, one thing is that stimulus money is a shot in the arm, and when it ceases to be, then those programs have to cease to be. The Head Start program is one that received a large amount of stimulus funds in 2010.
So when we say that, what exactly happened in 2010? Do we expect to spend all that money? And then if so, what did our kids get out of that
Well,
expense?
we were able to serve more children as a result of the stimulus funds by having more classrooms open. And the other thing it provided was the ability to give our existing staff education, because there's educational requirements that are coming down in 2012 where they must have a degree and many of our staff do not. And so the idea was to fund our staff to get their degrees, and some of them are participating in that. We still need to encourage our staff to participate in that more, but that wouldn't involve any jobs, but it did involve training dollars that would no longer be available.
So when we see this reduction in funding in this area, we're saying that there's not going to be any job loss. I still don't see that's a significant amount of funds. So what is it? Just was it all instructional materials, or was it food, or what exactly?
Much of it was training. There was also this component, though, of the Title 12 pilot, which was funded as a pilot and funded with stimulus funds. Anything funded with stimulus funds has a life that will come to an end unless there's a program to figure it out.
Thank you.
Skipping directly to higher ed, what we were already in discussions because of the growth in the higher ed program. At 10% a year, we were already spending over $10 million, and there were very little requirements in terms of eligibility requirements for a scholarship fund. So some of the things that we are looking at in terms of things that we think should be considered is a minimum GPA, for example. We don't have one presently, and we do fund students with as low as 1 point GPA. And so that's probably something we need to look at, see what the numbers are, and see if we can encourage these students to raise their grade point. Councillor Fulbright.
Would you clarify that for me, please? On 1 point GPA, to be qualified to renew your scholarship, you have to have 2 point.
No, not presently. There is not a GPA requirement for higher ed currently. They must turn in a transcript, and they must have completed hours, but they can all be, at D level, essentially.
That's not my documentation. I've got too many students that were laid off the program because their GPA was too low.
Well, they might not have been able to complete the number of hours, but as far as I know,
it was the GPA. You must maintain. It says so on the form.
Now, if they, in terms of this being in good standing with their school, if they're not in good standing with their school, then we would drop them, but not on the basis of a GPA. So, if there's one we need to look at, we'd be happy to do that. But I've run some of the numbers, and we're funding students with very low grade points. So that's just one thing, we think we need to look at. The second thing we've been looking at is other federal aid that a student receives. The maximum Pell this year is $27.75 a semester. So someone who is fully Pell eligible can receive up to $27.75 a semester. So should we look at. And that is, again, just something for discussion, some kind of tiered funding system based on the amount of federal aid they do receive, and bringing them up to some, at least some minimal level that we think will cover their costs.
These changes, would they have to change the higher ed statute, so we would have to change those, or do you think it's within the admin's authority to make these changes?
As far as I know, there is not a statute out there that sets out this type of detailed eligibility requirements. And in fact, we used to have some of these requirements, as I understand it, in the past, but they've just been changed over time. And, you know, for instance, I was surprised to hear that the GPA requirement was gone because I thought there was one. I think we used to consider resources and income, but we no longer do.
I have a question for Todd.
Yes, sir.
I know you don't know off the top of your head, but what is our higher ed statute? Is it just very simple and says start this program, or how did we actually start?
Pretty much, if I remember it correctly, it is, you know, we're, you know, going to have this program, and I don't know, but did it say a dollar amount on it?
I think it's provided in the budget.
Yeah. Very, very broad, very simple. I mean, and that's shooting from the top of my head. I can find out for you real quick.
I mean, I understand the perspective that admin could do it because it doesn't say they can, but is there some concern that maybe they can't do it unless we say they can? Is that a reasonable discussion to have?
It's a reasonable discussion. I mean, and one thing that you may, if you think that the program's being administrated too draconianly, if you will, too strict of requirements, you can set the requirements at, the minimum requirements by statute. I mean, but that's just to see, obviously there's a finite amount of money, and you want to get as much bang for your buck as possible, and it may not be a wise investment for a 1 point GPA.
And it sounds like to date we've been content to allow different administrations just to develop the policies.
Right.
Of course, they reported to us, and Ms. Knight has, but we haven't, in the act, changed any of these things. Certainly, when we upped the scholarship amount, we did so through the budget. We didn't change anything in the underlying statute. These changes, though,
Significant.
yeah, and it's not something that was spelled out in the act. So I'm just wondering, does that mean they can't do it? I don't know the answer to that question.
I can look at it.
Thank you.
And by way of history, what we've always done in the past is they brought the application to us, and we tweaked the application, approved the application, and that's the way it's gone forward.
Is that what you would propose? As you would come to us and say, this is what we plan on doing, or is the alternative you would come to us and say, this is what we've done?
I would like to come back and very soon, I would say in the next, at least right after budget time, come back with proposals around these and any other items that we would recommend for discussion at this committee, because of course changes that are this large I think warrant a lot of discussion. There may be ideas from this committee that we haven't considered and that we should consider, and so I would like to have that discussion with you all before implementing anything.
Thank you.
Well, since this is all on the board up here, cap of income eligibility and different things, I'm concerned about all of the scholarships that we fund outside of the state. I was always under the understanding in the past, the form said you had to live in the 14-county area, and then we were doing the contiguous counties next. And I see that we are funding a tremendous amount of scholarships where a lot of people don't even apply because they have been told for so many years if you lived outside the state, you didn't qualify. But now, look at all of our money that's going to out of state. We don't fund people for car tags and services, otherwise housing, who live outside. So before we go to drastically cutting, I think that should be considered as one of these things up here.
We do fund at-large students that are Pell eligible. I believe there are around 200 that are out of area that are not contiguous, that are out of Oklahoma, out of area, that fall into that category. And then we're also funding the contiguous counties, as you know, outside our boundaries technically, but within those contiguous counties that are adjacent to the boundary. So those are all things to be considered because, as we expand the population, obviously, we expand the cost. So.
Just one follow-up. On the students that we would fund that are outside the contiguous counties, let's say a student lives in New York, permanent address in New York, they might get a Pell eligible scholarship. Is that all tribal funds? Is it that they're getting?
They must be Pell eligible to be eligible for the at-large, but they receive the same amount as any other applicant.
And it's purely tribal funds, so it's within our discretion to determine whether we want to continue to fund those.
And I would say the amount of self-governance funds that are going into the pot, so to speak, and those are also flexible in terms of what our policy is in terms of how we administer those. That's to our design.
Just one more. I guess you'll break down for us how much. I mean, when you hear about, we're talking to make these tough decisions, you hear, well, there's Cherokees in different parts of the country that are getting them. I mean, it certainly has an impact on you when you think about the dollars, but you'll get us how many dollars we're actually talking about, because how significant, and maybe it's real significant. I don't know.
There haven't been, by and large, there's significant population out there, but they haven't necessarily been applying for these funds in large numbers. So, I believe that's historic. The way the BIA used to administer the funds when we first contracted them was basically it was an at-large program. It wasn't no residency was required for the original program, and I believe that's the way it had begun. Is for Pell eligible students that were Cherokee but could reside anywhere, and that's the way other tribes had administered and still do. Many of them still do.
Thank you, Minister. Okay.
We're running over time. I have three more people who have a question, and so I'm going to take those three, and then we'll end this discussion for this time. So, Councillor Fulbright.
Okay, I have a question. This has always worried me. The students that are Pell eligible, and everyone has to fill out the FAFSA summary sheet to see if they're Pell eligible or not. And my question has always been, what difference does it make whether they're Pell eligible or not? We're giving everybody the $2,000 either way. Let them worry about their own Pell. I can never see how that figured into the picture. We say, it looks on paper like, oh, these are Pell funded and these are over here. When in reality, we're funding both of them at the same amount.
That's right.
And the FAFSA report is what goofs up mine and Councilor Jordan's kids on not getting the summary. You change one little thing and the summary won't print. And if you don't do it way ahead of time, there's all kinds of reasons why you can't. I never could figure out how the Pell eligibility figured into whether we were awarding. And one other thing I want to say about all the students that go to Haskell. I got a call from a kid who had the grant for Haskell, and everything was paid for. And he was still getting, and Haskell didn't want to cash the check because he was still, it said, everything was taken care of. But I got an email back from higher ed that's when I found out the kids at Haskell were still getting the $4,000 a year when it was a turnkey job. I could see maybe some incidentals, but anyway, that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Those are two excellent points. Originally, the FAFSA was required because we did have the distinction between the Pell and the Pell. Somewhere along the line, that distinction went away. We treated both categories the same. We never eliminated the FAFSA as a requirement. The only good thing about that now that we're looking back on is that now we have income data and we have Pell eligibility data that we can now make some decisions around, perhaps. And so it provided us with some needed information anyway that will be useful to y'all, at least at budget time. So, but those are two very good points. And then the cost, relative cost by Haskell, we'd like to have that on the board for discussion. Also, income eligibility from the FAFSA, AGIs, beyond six figures, perhaps that's up for discussion by this.
Councilor Thornton.
I know in the past, as far as Haskell was concerned, we paid some kind of entry fee into the school, and it was something like $150.
I think it's around.
And that's all we paid, and that's all and I don't know who changed that we would give someone a full scholarship. So I can't understand why it's being done now. Another thing is, as far as the people inside, outside the nation, 2 years ago, we funded everyone inside the nation. It didn't make any difference what was going on. Those people were funded. Then people in Oklahoma that lived outside the nation, lived in Oklahoma, they were funded. And then people in the outside area to the world were funded. But we never did get to those people to the world, and very few of those in Oklahoma, because we funded all our students that were inside the nation. And I can't understand why that was changed in this amount of time. Who changed that? Because that was the way it was set up and the way it was supposed to be done. And I think we could probably go back in the minutes in education so far, and that's what was told to me. So I think someone needs to check into that, because as far as I could see, we're not supposed to be funding these people, especially outside of Oklahoma, if everybody else hadn't been funded.
We'll try to make some, gather some history about, if we can, about when policy changes like that were made, so we have some history about that, because I'm curious about that as well. Councillor Jordan.
And that is my question, was it a policy change or was it a change by this body?
I think it's probably, if I were to venture to guess, a mixture of both, that there were some policy changes. I think some of them had to do with Pell Eligible being the initial basis of the program. Originally it was only Pell Eligible in the old BIA program, and we later expanded that. I think the contiguous counties came as a result of discussion here at the council. I think there's probably a mixture of some of those changes coming about by administrative policy and by the legislative body.
Can you reduce to an email to us prior to the budget hearings when that occurred and how it occurred?
I can do my best to do that, do some kind of brief report to outline at least the major changes that have occurred over time.
Here, what I'm seeing is higher ed, a good deal of it is funded by our car tags. Our car tags can only be purchased by families living within the 14 counties. So we're taking their money, and instead of using it on the kids in the 14 counties, we're taking that money and giving it to the out-of-state children. And I think we're going to get a lot of questions about that, folks, because it is their car tag money that is funding these higher ed scholarships. And we only sell car tags within the 14 counties. So why is that money going out of the 14 counties?
I just want to clarify, it's motor fuels tax, but it's tax, and it's based on, what,
it's based on the 14
opportunity
counties.
Cost for selling within the jurisdiction. So it's still related.
Yes, and I have one question then I would like to yield to Mr. Baker. Tell me the exact amount we've cut from the scholarships.
Funds?
Yes.
Exact dollar amount I can't tell you. I know we processed approximately 1,400 of the 2,762.
No. I want to know how much you're contemplating cutting.
Oh, reducing the budget?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. I may have it here.
Looks like it's about.
And then I would like to yield to Mr. Baker, and I'm done.
213.
Yeah.
213.
I'm getting a little more than that, but yeah, it's less than.
But the motor fuels tax brings in a whole other can of worms, because we promised the state of Oklahoma that we would use those funds for things within the 14 counties. That's what we told them in Oklahoma. That's what we did. And we could use it in education, we could use it for health care, we could use it for those things. But we go to send it out of state, and I'm telling you, we're breaking that compact.
I'll get that number. Also consider that the amount of at-large scholarships is relatively small. The amount of DOI funds we receive is probably more than sufficient to cover those. And that was the basis of the program, is basically or Pell eligible students wherever they
But
reside.
the follow-up on that is, and maybe with the DOI it's different, but originally those BIA funds that were for Pell scholarships were only, you had to live in the jurisdiction. You couldn't spend a dime of that dollars if they were not in your jurisdiction. We got those dollars for the kids in our jurisdiction.
Would they have to attend school within the jurisdiction?
No, not necessarily
So the
attend
dollars
school.
might still go out of bounds.
All I know is that when we first had those precious few dollars, that was the BIA's, because when we took it over from the BIA, it was strictly for those within the jurisdiction.
I am familiar with how it's contacted from the BIA, and for every program that I've seen, it's been without regard to residence. Now, some tribes chose to pull it in, and we may have chosen to do that at some point, and I can go through those policy decisions and try to determine if that happened and when, so that we can have that for discussion.
Do you have an exact amount that we reduced, Jennifer, before we close?
But we don't get to count anybody outside the jurisdiction for federal funds. We don't get to count anybody outside the jurisdiction for those federal funds.
Federal funds really aren't adjusted based on population. At least BI funds are not
They
adjusted.
were originally allocated by population.
They're originally allocated by population. I can't tell you
Within
which
the 14
population.
counties. Within the 14 counties.
Sometimes, depending on the program, use different population numbers, so I can't answer that. We reduced by 122,000, and just a final point on the higher ed, the motor fuels reserve, the use of reserve that we're proposing on a one-time basis. So we think to be able to sustain that funding level for 2012, that some policy changes will have to be made to do that.
Okay. We're going to end this discussion for today then. Melanie, I have a request that if you would share your slides with this body.
I've emailed them to Shelley, and she can
That would be great.
share them in the group.
Yes. Okay. All right. So we have announcements. Are there any announcements? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much.
I have, and trying to keep